Thank you so much for joining us. The report is very upbeat about African economies, and we're obviously talking economies, not South Africa's economy. What is the key driving factor for, this growth that you guys have tracked?
Yes, African economies have been rather resilient in the midst of global financial difficulties, global economic and financial difficulties, and there are several reasons why African countries have been doing fairly well, and growth has been growing at a steady pace of about 4.8% projected for this year. And the reason is that on the one hand, domestic demand has been quite resilient, fueled by there's resource wealth, there is commodity prices that have remained fairly strong, and better availability of credit. Also, governments have been adopting policies that have supported growth. And so, because of those two reasons, African countries have done rather well. The policy environment is more conducive to growth.
Now, what I find interesting, of course, is that South Africa is not, the growth forecast is not including South Africa, and South Africa is Africa's largest economy. And we know that just recently Moody's has downgraded South Africa's credit rating. What does the report find, in relation to these growing economies and its relationship with South Africa, if any?
South Africa is the largest economy in the region, accounting for about a third of the output of sub-Saharan Africa. The other countries have been growing at a more dynamic pace than South Africa. There are several reasons for South Africa lagging. Some of it is external. It's also one of the countries in the region that's the most integrated in the global economy, both in terms of trade and finance. And because of the slowdown in Europe and in developing, in high-income countries, that has impacted South Africa. Also, because of domestic conditions, the growth has been slower than anticipated.
Now, of course, whilst everyone is excited about the fact that there's a lot of growth prospects for Africa, it is off a low base, isn't it?
For some countries, yes, there are low income, but there are many countries in Africa that are already middle income, and perhaps, people don't realize that, but there are about 21 countries in sub-Saharan Africa that are already middle income status. And at current growth pace, 10 additional countries could be middle income by 2025. So in Africa, there is a large variation across countries. Some are middle income. There are some countries which are already at have per capita incomes of $10,000. Of course, there are other countries which are much smaller in terms of per capita income.
Yeah, now,
but there is wide variation.
You were saying that there needs to be caution, and the newfound mineral wealth, particularly in some African countries, needs to be used wisely. Tell us why you introduced this caution.
Well, mineral governance is becoming increasingly important for countries with newly found resource riches. And we know that, from experience in history in the region, that if resource wealth needs to be translated into development and progress for the wider population, then there needs to be more transparency, more accountability of the public officials, better policy making, so that the wealth, resource wealth can benefit a larger number of people, rather than being captured by either a small, powerful elites or by political elites. And we know that in the region there has been a fair amount of corruption in cases where there are vast amounts of economic rent to be made.
Now, of course, South Africa is under the spotlight at the moment, given the crisis with wildcat strikes in the mining sector. I interviewed President Joyce Banda from Malawi recently, and she was saying that off the back of Malawi's recent find in terms of strategic minerals, that they're going to first, look at what other countries have done to ensure that mineral wealth is not in the hands of a small elite, but benefits the larger, population. Is this the kind of leadership that you're expecting from African countries?
Well, when there are vast amounts of resource wealth, then as I said, there tends to be, if there isn't enough transparency and accountability, then the population is not aware of what are the size of these resources, who is benefiting from them, how are these resources being, distributed, and to have more say in how the country is going to develop its resource wealth. It's important to have a wider debate amongst the population, as well as to learn from best practices, because we know that some countries have managed to grow well despite the resource wealth. So, the so-called resource curse is not inevitable. It can be avoided. And the basis for doing that is to have better, stronger institutions and good governance, more transparency, more accountability that would limit corruption and also, more law and rule of law.
Well, thank you so much for that. That was World Bank economist Punam Chuhan-Pole.